Of course, give us a great pleasure to welcome Chairman Ban Ki-moon with such impeccable credentials, and on behalf of the Malaysian government and people, commend you for your stewardship of the United Nations, and thank you, and I believe you have a major role to forge this sort of a cohesive and collaborative efforts within Asia. And Victor Ho and colleagues. Now, 70 years ago, in the Indonesian city of Bandung, referred to Victor Ho, leaders from 29 nations of Asia and Africa, Chao En Lai, Nehru, Nkrumah, under the chairmanship of Sukarno of Indonesia, gathered for the first major conference of the post-colonial period. They came from countries newly independent, struggling, or some of them struggling for independence, but more importantly, they spoke about sovereignty, dignity, solidarity. They insisted that nations of the global south would not remain spectators in history, but the architect of their own destinies. Now, those principles still resonate. Bandung taught us that sovereignty and solidarity are not opposites. Instead, they are two sides of the same coin. Today, as we face trade wars, new age of technological disruption, we must renew that spirit, one with a firm conviction for a new kind of integration. It is the conviction that we can engage the world freely, but on our own terms. It is about striving for sovereign independence or interdependence, forging partnerships for our choosing, of our own choosing, not ties that are imposed from on high. And ASEAN, as you know, accepts this principle of centrality, having that commitment to forge a strong bond within ASEAN countries, engage with our neighbors and friends, China, Korea, Japan, India, in Asia, continue to enhance relations and trade with the United States, Europe, and other countries. That centrality must work. Now, the global trading system, unfortunately, is in distress. The WTO, once the guardian of rules, have been left in a state of near paralysis. Meanwhile, the world's largest economies are no longer custodians of the system, but sometimes, unfortunately, are disruptors. Tariffs swing widely. Export controls are imposed and lifted with little warning. Financial sanctions reached far beyond the intended targets. What was once a web of mutual gain is now a network of vulnerabilities. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we know that today, and in today's fragmented world, economic compartmentalization, as once propounded by Joseph Schumpeter, can no longer serve the complex, interdependent nature of geoeconomics. Unfortunately, we're living through a weaponization of interdependence. Instead of advancing facilitation, energy pipelines, shipping routes, semiconductor supply chains now have become instruments of unfair leverage. Payment systems and capital flows are deployed as tools of pressure. Now, the result is pervasive uncertainty, a sense of fragility. This is the new reality. We convene here to discuss the principle of centrality, working together, but we also have to realize and accept the reality of unbridled mercantilism, of generating economic disparities or disruptions, export restrictions will have profound security and geopolitical implications as well. But history shows us that when nations compete to build walls, prosperity declines and instability spreads. That is precisely the reason why we argue for sovereign interdependence and effective collaboration with all. We are entering a world without a single center of gravity. Some describe this as a new age of geoeconomics, where trade, finance, technology, and security no longer run on separate tracks, but converge as points of rivalry. Others call it a return to spheres of influence, where major powers seek to divide the map into zones of control. To my mind, neither path serves the interests of smaller nations, Malaysia and ASEAN, because sovereign interdependence offers another way. It accepts that interdependence is unavoidable, but insists that it must be built on choice, on resilience, and mutual respect. It preserves openness while safeguarding dignity. It rejects both enforced dependence and enforced decoupling. Now, Asia's dynamism is clear. While our middle classes are growing, our digital economies are expanding, and trade volumes remain resilient, fragmentation is real. Demographic headwinds in Northeast Asia, unresolved rivalries across the region, and the risk of polarization all weigh heavily. If the Asian century is to be realized, it will require deliberate effort. Convergence such as this, great minds, Ban Ki-moon, and friends, to think, to ensure that policies are well coordinated, and investment in shared resilience. Now, ASEAN offers a model built on open, inclusive, and non-exclusive regionalism. It remains one of the few groupings where rivals sit together in dialogue. Malaysia is determined to preserve that centrality, not as rhetoric, but as practice that requires deepening the architecture of regional cooperation. This year, ASEAN and China concluded negotiations for the ASEAN-China Free Trade Area 3.0. It will be presented to leaders in October. It now embraces the digital economy, green growth, supply chain connectivity, technical standards, and support for small and medium-sized enterprises. It reflects the new realities of our time, that prosperity today is shaped not only by fair trade, but also by data flows, by digital platforms, and by sustainable energy transitions. For ASEAN, this FTA demonstrates the engagement with China can be rules-based, inclusive, and future-oriented. At the same time, we must not neglect the wider architecture of the Asia-Pacific. The Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership remains the largest free trade area in the world, covering 30% of the global GDP. But RCEP must not remain a legal text on paper. It must be renewed with political energy. Now, Malaysia intends to convene an RCEP summit in October, in conjunction with the ASEAN Leaders Summit. The aim is to take stock, accelerate implementation, and to demonstrate that Asia can still lead the cause of openness even as others turn inward. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have now new challenges in technology, artificial intelligence, automation, digitalization, and remaking the world with startling speed. Let us begin, work together as a cohesive team, and be determined and remain optimistic and dignified, sometimes a rare term in politics these days. But I believe and I share your optimism, and let us work together to save the region and the world. Thank you. Terima kasih.